Welcome to a Compliance Conversations hosted by Insurance Licensing Services of America and Spot On Insurance. Today we'll be covering pre-licensing exams and continuing education.
Thank you everyone for joining us. This is going to be a 1-hour session. 1 hour, we tell Joyce, stop talking, Joyce. If you guys have any questions, just type it into the Q&A section. And we'll get to those as soon as we get a little break in between.
So today our guest panelists are Lesli, Leakey, Continuing Education and Regulatory Compliance Manager at Prometric. We got Rachel Chester, Chief of Consumer and Licensing Services, Rhode Island Department of Business Regulation, Insurance Division. Welcome, thank you for joining us. Woohoo! We should be giving prizes. And Barbara Gavin, AD Banker and Company. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now our ILSA and SOI panelists are Christy Roberts with glasses. Christy is our licensing manager. Christian Masonette, who's a Spot On Insurance manager. Whoa, whoa. Joyce King, our quality assurance administrator. She'll be taking care of business here. You'll hear from her a lot. She's our moderator. And of course, Russ Foster, GM at ILSA.
And Joyce is going to be shooting out all the questions, including all of those questions that were sent to ccquestions@ilsainc.com. So one of the resources that we have made available during COVID is our ILSA newsroom. We're actually not going to even share that today because a lot of you that are here today have participated before, but that newsroom is at ilsainc.com/newsroom. Today, we're going to be talking about pre-licensing exams and continuing education. And I think one of the things that 2020 has taught us is that we can't take anything for granted, right? Mm-hmm. We can't procrastinate. Agents never procrastinate about CEs, taking their exams and whatnot. So this is like something that is so relevant because I mean, it's something that, you know, right now we realize anything changes every single week. So we're excited to talk about this topic about CEs, exams, pre-licensing, the different waivers that are available, the different extensions that are around, and maybe some of the states that are not being lenient. We definitely want to know about that. So one of the things we do have actually, from when I went through the names, I realized that there are some attendees that haven't participated before. So I want to make sure that they know where the previous sessions are on YouTube. And so we'll show that, and then we'll also show some other resources that we have on YouTube. So this is our YouTube channel, and this is for Spot On Insurance. And we have all of the different compliance sessions that we've done since March, the middle of March.
They're adding up.
They're adding up. So first steps for new surplus lines brokers, Secretary of State compliance, beyond licensing, that has to do with the Secretary of State as well, cybersecurity.
Cybersecurity has been super popular. Oh my goodness.
And so that's there. If you haven't gotten to come to any of the previous sessions, that's where those are at. And in terms of continuing education and kind of broadening your knowledge with licensing, with compliance, you can also check out our ILSA YouTube channel. And we have, oh my goodness, there's insurance licensing and compliance. We have, oh my goodness, we have bloopers. I think
they are bloopers too.
Yeah, we got bloopers too, so people love that. But we have just an amazing wealth of information here. So this just goes along with broadening your knowledge, continuing your education. We have videos right there you'll see on surplus line zero reports. So that's where those are at. Those are our YouTube channels for ILSA Inc. and for SOI, Spot On Insurance. Thanks, Christian. So let's get right on to it, Joyce. This is your moment when you're like quiet and then you're ready to go. Get us out the gate.
Well, I'm super excited to have you ladies join us today. Thank you to each one of you for being here. And I've had an opportunity to kind of talk with you back and forth through emails and come up with some questions to give you ladies, and just that way we can bring all this knowledge to our viewers. We do have some questions from CC Questions, and of course, as Arleen mentioned earlier, if you're in the attendee list right now and you have questions for these ladies, if you'll submit those through the Q&A, I'll see that light up and I'll pull your question in and present it to the panel for everybody so that everybody can gain from that. Okay, so we want to start today with pre-licensing, and Barb, I'm coming at you, honey. Here we go. First question I have, you know, I always say to our to the folks who are with us, I work at ILSA, so I know a lot about licensing and compliance, but I'm not an insurance agent. So when it comes to pre-licensing, we really don't know that much about that. Well, that's where we rely on you great folks to handle that part, you know, before the agents come to us for licensing. But my first question then is, are all pre-licensing courses offered online?
Well, that's kind of a hot topic right now. Every state allows pre-licensing courses to be offered online except Illinois.
Ooh.
Okay, so Illinois does have a 50% requirement of their 30 hours, 15 for life, 15 for each line. Half of those hours have to be in a live classroom. All right, now that has posed some issues, you know, during COVID. So would you like to address those right now?
Yes, that was,
okay.
there we go.
Let's jump right in. All right, so they did have an executive order that did allow, this was back in May, I believe, allow their insurance licensing courses to be offered online or through webinar. So that has been a tremendous help. Now, they did just, the executive order is going to expire on August 22nd. So we are anxiously waiting to see if that's going to be extended or if everyone's going to be forced to go back to live class. So we're inching toward that deadline, and you know, we were hoping that we would know before, you know, the very bitter end. But yeah, that's been one of the states that has been an issue during COVID, is just, you know. Yeah.
And you said the 27th, so the 27th, 22nd.
Yes.
Oh, in 2 days.
Yes.
Oh.
Well, today's the 20th. Yeah, 2 days. Yeah. End of the week. Yep.
Saturday doesn't even count, so really.
No. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, hopefully they're having some meetings right now to figure this out.
For you, how does a vendor like AD Banker pivot, right? Like, so all of a sudden, you know, you were doing obviously online courses, but in Illinois, you had a different procedure. How did you pivot to be able to get Illinois residents what they needed during this time?
So we're in a great position because we are a classroom company and an online company. So, you know, we were already doing the live class, and we've always done webinars as well. So we were able to utilize our instructors that teach webinars to immediately be able to pick up and do webinars. We also have an online course that is, so that represents 50% of the required hours. So we already had an online course available. So that was easy. We just made that available, which we didn't have to do anything. It was already there. So they just take their, you know, pre-licensing certification exam right through the online course. And then we were able to start offering webinars, and we already do that for continuing education. So for us, it was easy. It was a struggle for some who weren't able to offer on all platforms, but luckily we were able to answer right away.
One more question for you, Barb. So was that only allowing them to meet 50% of their requirement? How did they meet the rest? Or was it, were you able to get it approved at the state?
Yes, the state allowed it to count toward the entire number of hours. So yeah, everybody that has been taking it since, you know, the COVID executive order has been compliant just by doing it online or doing it by webinar.
Very good.
But that's about to change.
On Sunday.
Yeah.
On Sunday.
Yes.
Kind of makes me think about football. Sunday.
All right, my next question actually has to do with self-study. So is there any significant benefit to choosing self-study over an online course or web-based classroom? Like, is it cheaper?
Well, it is cheaper, however, that cheaper isn't always better. First of all, let me just clarify, this can be confusing, but any self-paced course is considered self-study. So it could be correspondence, which is, you know, hard copy books with a sealed exam, or it could be an online course.
Okay.
So if it's self-paced, it's going to be considered self-study.
Okay.
Now there's a big difference, you know, correspondence, when you just have a book and a sealed exam, you're kind of on your own. There's no activity and there's no, you know, outside help, if you will. But with an online course, you know, most companies out there have interactive courses, including videos and, you know, questions and activities. So even though it's still considered self-paced or self-study, those are highly interactive. So it really encourages, you know, the learning process. So those are going to be a little more expensive than just your correspondence courses, but it again offers more support. Live class or webinar is obviously going to have an instructor. So yes, that's going to cost more money, but I think it really depends on the learning style and what somebody needs to pass the exam the first time around. So when you're talking price, really, you have to think about how many times does somebody have to take the exam to pass? Because if they're just got a book and a test, it might take them 4 times to pass. That's already covered the cost of a live class.
Okay.
And the time, you know, that you spend, you know, doing the studying. So it's really based on the learner's, you know, learning style.
Okay.
So I'll add something to that. So for those that don't know, I'm also a licensed adjuster here in Texas. And I did the online self-study, or it wasn't self-study, it's online classroom equivalent version of taking the course and sitting for the state exam. But it is still considered self-paced as an online course. And it takes a disciplined person to sit there and set aside time every day to go through the course, to study, and to do it in a timely manner, because you don't want to take a month to go through a self-paced course and then try to test, because what you learn at the beginning of the month, you're probably not going to remember when it comes time to take the test. So Christy's raising her hand.
Yeah, that's a great point, Leslie. Thanks for bringing that up.
So, I mean, you really have to be disciplined to sit down. It's a 40-hour course. Set aside a week to start and finish and take your exam and pass and get that license and put that part behind you.
And I'll just read my own experience, and not pre-licensing, but when I was getting my associate in risk management, first course that I took, I did self-study. I failed. That was 5 months of my time that I obviously didn't spend efficiently, and I failed. And so when I retook it, I think it was risk control, I retook it in a classroom setting at the College of Insurance, and then the other 2, and passed, you know. So definitely it's worth it, paying a little bit more and having that interaction.
What do you think, Christy? You had to take the adjuster exam too, didn't you?
I haven't taken it yet.
Oh, you haven't. I know you've been doing the classes.
I've started it and gotten through it twice, and I started it and got halfway through it the 3rd time. And, you know, working and doing that at the same time is so hard.
Yeah.
And then, you know, if we get busy during the week, I can't get back to it. So Sabrina, she's on here too, and she was like, oh, guilty, waited till the bitter end too. We've yet to go back to revisit the adjuster portion again, but we have to do it. So we want to get our SILA fellow designation, and
Yes,
that's
absolutely
the only way we can do it. So
you got it.
Yep. That's how I have my SILA fellow, is being a licensed adjuster.
I just picked the wrong course. I should have just went with producer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you've got your producer, that counts.
Oh, no, I don't have it either. But I don't have any applicable experience on either one of them, so I'm lost. Yeah, I'm lost. I'm in the weeds. I don't know what co-insurance is, and I've had insurance for You
I
know.
think one of the attendees should send out a challenge to you on the chat right
Yes.
Please don't. I'd probably have to do it then.
We have a couple of questions that came in on the chat. Someone says, I've always done my continuing ed online. I would be open to online certifications. Scheduling and travel are a problem now, of course, for certifications that have travel involved. Then he says, are the certification regulators willing to have more online certification learning opportunities?
They said regulators. So Rachel, I think this puts you up.
Can you say that question just one more time?
Are the certification regulators willing to have more online certification learning opportunities?
Yeah, so that doesn't really apply to Rhode Iowans. I mean, I'm not sure what a certification means in this context, to be honest with you.
And maybe they need designations.
He might be talking about designations. Carrie, so if you can just kind of expound a little bit on that. Yes.
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, from Rhode Island's perspective, we don't have any concerns with online delivery of any education. I would lean on some of the other folks on the panel to talk about any obstacles that might be in some states specific to that. I'm sorry, I don't have anything real good to offer about that.
So I would say as far as our states go, and when I say our states, I'm referring to the Prometric states that I work with, you know, they all, as far as the insurance licensing education, it's all online. Every state we have allows for it to be online. Those that were approved to deliver classroom when COVID happened, they were allowed to be delivered via webinar. It varied from state to state on what a provider had to do to get approved to do that. But as far as our states are concerned, there's no barriers to having education online.
Yeah, Iowa does require live class for CE, but they did waive that during COVID. And as well, Illinois, like I had mentioned, did waive the live class requirement. So.
Carrie says many designations require both the face-to-face and online portions and face-to-face testing. But I'm willing to bet when we get down into the exam portion of this discussion, we can talk more about how many of those are actually moving to the online.
It's probably also specific to the designation and whoever the company is that's offering that designation.
Yeah,
what are their resources? I'm not sure that's a
American College.
a regulatory thing.
Christy, you may have to help us out with this. What are some states that have made recent accommodations to their licensing process or the pre-licensing, such as temporary producer licensing, and maybe where, at least for a time, they're waiving fingerprint requirements or background checks, and not necessarily looking for a state-specific list, but are you aware of states that are doing that, and maybe how long you think that may go on?
In the beginning, there were a few states that came out and opened up their temporary license. In the temporary license, you might get the license, but you still have to fulfill the obligation of taking an exam or doing fingerprints. Whatever their state requires for their residents, you still have to fulfill that in the long run. Some of them were 4 months, and some of them were almost like, okay, we're going to revisit this in 4 months. Because at that time, you know, in March, they really expected the COVIDs to be over around the first part of the summer. So they were willing to extend it for 3 to 4 months. Now we're seeing there's really been no definitive end to it. Numbers rise, numbers decrease. So I think now the states are going to go back and maybe open up that window a little bit more and give them more of an opportunity to fulfill that obligation. But the temporary license normally is only for 6 months, and it is really to allow for a producer maybe that's fulfilling a designated producer role who might have passed away, or, you know, they're jumping in an emergency type situation. So it was set in their licensing rules to only be effective for 6 months. So I don't know if states are going to be willing to even allow that license to go on, or they'll cancel it and then allow you to reapply for another temporary license. I just don't know how that's going to happen, and I really don't know that the states are prepared for that either. So there's been some states that just do not, allow for the temporary license too. So it's really like everything else. It's a mixed bag of nuts. You can go onto your resident state's website and look up that information, and you can bet it's going to be different from California, Texas, Florida, New York. So that's really where we stand right there with that.
Hey, can I jump in for a second? I did actually compile a list. There's about 15 states that still offer the temporary license, but all of their verbiage still says until, either the executive orders are listed or, social distancing is lifted. And I do want to just point out that the temporary license is not an answer for most companies.
It's not.
It's just for resident licenses. So a lot of our clients are not able to utilize the temporary license. So, even though it's out there, it hasn't been as helpful as we would have hoped, during this time.
Correct. And it really is for like that mom and pop license, where maybe the old man or old woman passes away and the son needs to come in and fill that role. It's not for the big insurance brokerages or the agencies that are licensed in all 50 states. So that's really not the case for temporary licenses.
Can I also?
It's only issued in the resident state, not non-resident states.
I'd love to provide some regulator perspective on that if I can.
Yes.
You sure can.
Please.
So Rhode Island, we've been at this pandemic for a while. On March 17th is the day that exists in my mind, because that's when we sent everybody home, and remote became our new way of running government here in Rhode Island. So as regulators, we had never really considered any issues related to a pandemic, because no one's ever thought about a pandemic. But I'm fortunate enough to have an awesome insurance commissioner who's also the co-chair of the NEIC's Producer Licensing Task Force, and we hit the ground running. In Rhode Island, when we don't do fingerprinting, but when getting a state criminal background check couldn't happen, and when our exam provider, brick and mortar, closed the doors, we said, expletive, we've got some stuff to do immediately, because this is big. This is a big deal. So we met with NIPR, we met with the Producer Licensing Task Force, any other state that was willing to jump in and talk to us about it, and came up with like some criteria for the temporary producer licensing in the short term. And that was like the first week of April, I think, maybe. So yeah, 6 months is a long time to have a temporary producer license when temporary producer licensing has never really been a thing.
Yeah.
And we extended our expiration dates for people that maybe fell on hard times. We would consider any continuing education extension if someone didn't get it done in the 2 years they had to do it. It's always good to do those things on time, because you never know what's going to happen. And from our perspective, the remote exam is the answer to not having temporary licensing in Rhode Island and in, I think, a lot of states. So I think as you see those numbers go up of jurisdictions getting remote examinations online, hopefully the blow will be softened a little bit more.
Yep.
I'm not sure if
involved, just so everyone knows, behind the scenes.
There is, yes.
I'm not sure if everybody saw how I worked the magic there and segued us to exams with Rachel's help. Thank you, Rachel, because that's exactly where we were going next.
I wanted to answer one of the questions from the Q&A, and it comes from Dan. And he posed the question directly to me, so he's calling me out. Do you think that taking 5 months to complete the course might have contributed to the difficulty you had passing the exam? Most online course providers emphasize the importance of making steady progress and completing the course in more or less 4 weeks. Well, yes, Dan, for sure. Like when you take something and you expand it and extend it so long, you definitely lose focus. So, but this was back in 1905 when I took my designation. Things have improved. I don't even know how it's done today, but this was a long time ago, 1992. Yes, so definitely I think a shorter period of time would have been better. I would have crunched.
We have another question that came in the chat. Can you take an online course for pre-licensing for an agent from any state? Or do you have to take the online course for your state of residence? I have 2 homes. One is in New York and the other in Georgia. So the first thing I've asked them, and I haven't got the reply yet, is, you know, which one do you actually, what do you call home? I guess where, as of right now, where's the driver's license say is your primary residence? And when I hear back from them on that, we can go a little further with that question.
And I think for us, we kind of really know what resident states like us that are in licensing, we really, for us, it's not even where's your driver's license, right? We have different criteria to meet resident license, right? Like we know that you can actually have your office in New York and not live in New York and you be a resident of that state. So that'll be interesting what she comes up with. And yeah, we know.
From my perspective, from a regulator perspective, at least in Rhode Island, I've had to answer this question only a handful of times, to be honest with you. Where do you file your taxes?
Good.
Yes.
Good.
That
And
is,
I was going to add that you should take the course for the state in which you're going to sit for the exam. Well,
yes.
not every state has a pre-licensing education requirement. If I'm going to test in Texas and I'm going to need to know Texas laws, I
Yes.
would go take a Louisiana course and learn about Louisiana laws, because that's not going to help me pass the Texas state exam.
It's not. And some states require it to be, if you're in that state longer than 6 months. So if your residency is 6 months or longer, you're considered a resident of that state.
We have someone else
I
who's
have
waiting.
one resident license, so.
Yeah. Yep.
Here's someone has said Georgia and New York reciprocate. So it really doesn't matter which state, because you can get licensed in one and get reciprocity in the other. So one test. In my opinion, the Georgia test is easier. You can take the Georgia test in any state because the testing provider has testing centers all over the country.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would,
Yeah, that's a little,
I'm not sure.
if you are in New York and you spend the majority of your time in New York, you write the majority of your policies for New York.
And I would just say that no
Insurance.
one should be taking a state licensing exam based on what they think might be easier.
You're
That
right
doesn't
about
make
that.
Well, the thing is, you would get a non-resident license in the other state, and most states have reciprocity.
Yes.
So that's not unique to Georgia and New York. So yeah, and New York does have some more stringent requirements, but you've got to follow the state in which you are considered a resident producer.
Yes, and speaking what Lesli mentioned, Texas does have a homeowner's policy specific to Texas, their exam course. So if you're studying Louisiana stuff, you're not going to know what Texas's homeowner's policy is about. So if you're doing the majority of your insurance work out of Texas, you need to take Texas's exam, vice versa with the other states.
Yeah, the person who weighed in earlier said it sounds like the original person who posed the question is a resident of both states.
It could be. Yes, you could be.
They said, my driver's license is still in New York. I'm relocating permanently to Georgia in 2 months. It has been delayed due to COVID.
Well, then
Okay,
wait 2
so-
months and take it in Georgia.
That helps.
That would be my suggestion.
Yes.
Say that one more time.
I said, well, wait 2 months and take the test in Georgia.
Yes.
All right. Okay, let's get down to, we were going to talk about remote proctoring. like to get into that now. And first, Leslie, just talk to us about what is remote proctoring and testing.
Sure. So remote proctoring is, it started before COVID, but COVID's really brought it to the forefront. And it's the ability to take a state licensing exam from the comfort of your own home, from your office building, from anywhere that you have proper internet connection and a computer. So this is helpful right now for those that don't feel comfortable going into a physical test center location. Really was helpful for this, the states that had it when all three of us had to shut our test centers down for that period of time to protect all of our candidates. So really, as long as you have a good computer, a webcam, and really good internet connection, you should be able to take a remote proctored test.
All right. What are, how is the virtual testing experience similar or different from being in an actual physical testing location? And another, I'm going to ask you two questions. Is remote proctoring available 24/7?
You want to go ahead, Leslie, or do you want me to help?
Sure, you start, Barb.
Okay, thanks. So as far as like advantages, disadvantages, or the experiences, obviously, driving to a physical location can cause a little more anxiety. So that could be a disadvantage to taking it at a physical location than taking it remotely. So that would be one. I think for all three vendors, the test simulators are pretty much the same, whether you take it remote or at a physical location. But there are a lot more technology requirements by doing it remotely. And of course, Rachel can jump in at any time as well. And as far as it being available 24/7, as long as there are proctors available, you can schedule your exam any day, anytime. All three test vendors have confirmed, that information.
And I've sat through several simulations of online remote proctoring exams, and if it's going to take a certain kind of person that's going to be, again, the word disciplined enough to not get nervous when they've got to take their driver's license and stick it in front of the screen, make it perfect, not get nervous when they're showing the whole room, be okay with not being able to have food or drink or take a break. So all of these things are important to weigh when you're making a decision whether or not you want to go into brick and mortar shop or you want to take it online. With our current topic, of course, the folks that are uncomfortable going into a brick and mortar, this solves that problem. They may have to, consider the other, disciplines that they might need to effectively do that at home. The internet connection, I think, is going to be the biggest thing as well.
Yeah, technology.
What about the security process?
So like the check-in process?
Yes.
So I believe I can speak for all three vendors in saying that what happens in the physical test center, we replicate as far as remote proctoring. Obviously, we can't wand anybody like we would in the test center because they're in their own home, but we'll check their hands, make sure there's no writing anywhere. We'll inspect glasses to make sure, nobody's hidden a camera or anything there. Make sure there's no Bluetooth devices in their ears. Make sure their desk area is, clean. My doors are all closed, so it's making sure that your doors are closed, that nobody's going to come in and interrupt you. What have I missed, Barb?
You got to have a movable camera because you have to do a 360 of the room underneath the desk and everything to make sure that there is nothing hidden.
And you have to use the same computer when you test to make sure that you can actually, when you do like a system check to register for the exam, at least with our vendor, you have to use that same exact computer in that same situation for connectivity. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to take the exam. So you can't do a system check with your computer at home and then take your exam at the office.
Yes. Yeah, we're the same. We recommend that when you do the initial system check, when you're registering, use it on the exact same equipment, exact same internet, location, everything is the same as when you're going to log in that day to do your test.
here would be my big question. Can I eat and drink while I'm taking my test?
Nope.
Nope.
Really?
None of this.
Nope.
Can't cheat with food or drink. Why can't I eat and drink while taking my test?
Because the
You can
proctor
eat,
doesn't
drink,
want to
and-
watch you eat and drink.
They're welcome to eat and drink too.
Because you tip your drink over and short out your keyboard, Joyce.
Oh, okay. Oh, I probably would. You know me well. Okay, then. How about apparel restrictions?
So I am aware, and I think this is pretty similar to the physical location requirements that you know, you can't have hoodies or jackets or anything where you could hide a camera. And Leslie had mentioned the eyeglasses. They want to make sure that there's no spyware. No jewelry is allowed. Anything that, you know, anything bulky that's easy to hide a camera obviously would be an issue. Your hair, if you tuck it behind the ears, you might be hiding something in there. So they actually have, you know, requirements for, you know, you're not tucking your hair behind your ears and stuff like that. So, you know, it's pretty specific.
I could hide
Say
more
if you-
stuff with my hair just hanging down.
I
Shaggy. I could hide all sorts of stuff in here.
I would say as far as
all that.
as far as clothes go, if you wouldn't wear it to the physical test location, don't wear it while you're at home taking a remote proctored exam.
Oh.
That's some good advice.
Ooh.
Okay, so what else? Can I have scratch paper? Can I take a break?
So as far as scratch paper, we have an online scratch pad now. I believe the other two do as well. So we don't allow physical scratch paper.
And that is another difference between the two, because some people are used to kind of doing a brain dump where they'll take, you know, what they remember and they jot it down before, you know, while they're taking their test, but you can't do that. It's a lot harder to do that with that virtual notepad. So that's
I also like to write things down when I'm taking a test. I like to jot down you know, things that might help me in another answer that might, you know, be down the line. I like to jot down little brain teasers. It would be tough with the online whiteboard for me, but I'm sure you get a whole generation of people that are totally comfortable with that.
And as far as breaks, there are no scheduled breaks for insurance exams. I know, Leslie, you would agree with this. We were just talking about this yesterday. But if somebody needed to take a break, the clock would not stop, and you would have to go through the entire process over again with a 360 and everything that you had to do security-wise when you return from that break. So it's like you're starting from over, and then your time for the exam is still going. So
Losing the time.
yeah.
Somebody said, wow, I had no idea how formal the process was. And they are asking, is there only one proctor per exam, or do they have multiple screens for observation?
Ooh, that's a good question. You mean, is a proctor watching just one person? I'm not sure the answer to that one. Yeah.
I think that the proctors are not one-to-one. I think it's more than one-to-one.
It's definitely more than one-to-one. I want to make sure I understand the question correctly. A student or a candidate only has one proctor.
One proctor.
Okay.
But a
Okay.
proctor will be watching more than one candidate.
Okay. That took care of it. Let's see. Can you skip a question and return to it later?
I'll go ahead and take this one. I know, first of all, if it's a Finra exam for securities, the answer is absolutely not. They do not allow this. And that would be another difference between taking it in a physical location and doing it online. As far as the state insurance exams, the states do have the option of determining what they would allow. I think the reason why most states don't allow this is because if somebody did take a break, they might be looking up information and then going back and returning to questions that they didn't answer. So I think it's more of a security issue if they don't allow you to go back to a question. But I don't know if that's true for every single state. Rachel, do you know if that's
You know, I think that you can go back to a question. I don't think you can take a break. That's how I think we're set up in Rhode Island.
Okay.
So you don't get breaks, but you can
Go back
save
to
a
the
question and move on or go back to a question to answer it.
It makes sense that if they allow one, they wouldn't allow the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. How long do you ladies think that remote testing will continue to be offered? Do you think this is just a temporary fix, or this is a new way of life?
I think it's here to stay.
With the exception of Alabama. So Alabama did allow remote testing for a short period of time when they only had one test center open, but then they ended it July 31st. So that is the only one that did offer it, and then they stopped it. But all the rest of them, I believe, are intending on this being the way of the future.
I will say that the exam providers have been very responsive in this space. I'm just high five. Regulators are all working hard in the background trying to figure out how to solve this, and working with our partners to figure out how to help us solve this problem. And remote learning and remote testing isn't a new thing, but it's a new thing for insurance licensing. So it's where's our comfort level with that? And I think that we're very comfortable with it at this point because we have to be. So we've been very loud about it, at least in Rhode Island, we've been loud about it. And there's a lot of movement with the Producer Licensing Task Force and educating other commissioners on what remote proctoring is, and sort of breaking down any questions they may have had. I'll admit that we interviewed all of the providers or all of the vendors that offer this back in 2018 and 2019, and we really didn't want to be a guinea pig state for it. So we were like, okay, when it works and it's awesome, we're totally on board. So we're sort of kicking ourselves that we didn't do it, when we had the opportunity to shine and take the spotlight. But every jurisdiction is just going to have to figure out how to overcome whatever obstacle, whether it's statutory, regulatory, cybersecurity, a personal comfort level. All of these things are going to have to be taken into consideration. And we are talking about it nationally all the time.
And for a lot of our states, the conversations were already happening about remote proctoring long before COVID was a thing. So that's why I believe the majority of the states that have it, they're going to keep it. Those that don't have it are just waiting until they can get it.
The ability to offer it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's see. When you take remote and proctored testing, do you know your results immediately?
You know your results immediately, but you don't get your scorecard. I think they have up to 3 days to email the actual scorecard, but okay. The results.
So I know for our vendor, there is no scorecard. They get their information in their profile. So to recreate the scorecard, I think it may be something that will, if many people ask for that, I suppose that they'll have to do that, but it's built into their profile.
Okay.
And for us, it pops up on the screen because we're using the same test driver for remote proctoring that we do in the physical test center. So it pops up on the screen to tell them if they passed or failed, and then they get an email score.
So my next question is what states are currently allowing the remote testing, and then I said, or is the shorter list the states that don't. Rhode Island, I know you do, and it's new, and I wanted for you to talk to us about that, Rachel, about everything that kind of went into getting it started, all of the things that went into the background, and then I think you told me y'all have had a taker, and I want to hear about that.
So we just opened up our online offering, I think last week. I barely know what day of the week it is. So I think it was, it was last week. They delivered the first one on Monday at 7:15 in the morning, not 3:15 in the morning, which I thought was the time. But it is available 24/7. We have had 8 additional people go through this process in the last week. So for a small volume exam state, I'm very excited that there haven't been any hiccups that would prevent this from happening.
That's great.
I basically met with our vendor once a week for a couple months in the background. There is a lot of stuff that does go on, and I'm not going to get into the details. There's legal stuff, there's all sorts of other things. But we've heard good things. We're excited to keep it going. It would be impossible for me to really undo the onion that created remote proctoring in Rhode Island. So I don't think you really want me to go into too much depth, but there was a lot of work involved.
Okay.
Do you want me to provide you with the list of states that are currently offering?
Absolutely.
All right. We've got Colorado. There's 15 states.
Okay.
Colorado, North Dakota, Nebraska, New Hampshire, New Mexico, New York, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Utah, Virginia, Vermont, Washington, and Wisconsin.
Oh, wow.
Those
Did
are
you get all those, Christy? Yeah, I saw you writing furiously.
I can email you, Christy, if you want.
You can also play it back in our YouTube channel.
True.
That's true.
I write fast. I was able to get them all.
Good job.
Christy, if you have a chance and you can type all those into the chat feature, not the Q&A, but the chat feature, then our attendees can have those as well.
I sure will.
Thank
if
you.
I can figure out how to do it.
Just go to the bottom, click chat, and then you'll see it over there. Click the toggle that says all panelists and attendees. So ladies,
I can plug the 80 Banker blog that has all this information already in it.
you can do that too.
Shamelessly.
Shameless plug. Let's do it. Everybody put your shameless plug in the chat. I love it. So I have a question for the states that are not offering that. How soon can I get a test if my state doesn't offer remote testing? I know that's going to be dependent on what your state is, and I don't have that information.
It is. Actually, there's a lot of it does depend on the state's social distancing requirements. So there are several states that are at 100% capacity. So they are, yes. Now, again, that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to get a test date right away, but at least they do have their test centers open, right? So for those states, it'll be a little bit easier, and especially if they offer remote testing, it'll be a lot easier. But if they don't, it also depends on how comfortable the candidate is, to go out when, with the social distancing. But there are a whole host of states that are 75% or less available. So the best answer for this is you've got to check the website of the test company that you're using for available dates. And my recommendation is to schedule your test date now and work towards your test date. Don't wait until you're finished, because then you might have to wait another 3 weeks to get a test date.
You're going to forget everything you learned.
Yeah, and this is the best practice anyway. You should always work toward your test date rather than, Christy, waiting till you're finished to study before you schedule your exam. It puts the pressure on you to finish it. Yeah, so there's no great answer to this question, but I think it's worth repeating that we're in a pandemic. We're all going to have to be patient. You might not get in to take your test right away, and there's nothing we can do in most cases. It's just the circumstances. So, be patient, and if you can't get a test date right away, then you need to go back into your course, and you need to, keep working toward, studying until you can actually get your exam scheduled.
We have got 12 minutes left. Ted and Arleen, do we need to cut away and do anything real quick, or can I go on into CEs?
No, go ahead, go on.
Okay. We're close enough. I think we're going to get this done in one session if we get through CEs pretty quickly. All right. So here, I'm going to fire off some questions, and whoever can answer, just, buzz and go. All right. Do all states eventually grandfather or exempt people from doing CEs who have held a license for a certain amount of time? And if so, what do you say is the average amount of time that you see states grant that for?
So I would say No, not all states eventually grandfather. There are some states out there that say no matter what, no matter how long you've had a license or how old you are, you have to do your CE. And you know, I was thinking about the average time that the states that do grandfather give that, and to my knowledge, there's no really uniformity, rhyme or reason. It really does vary by state, and some states are you have to be this age, but you also have to have held your license for this long.
Yep.
And you can't have had a lapse in your license. That is a big thing. People think that they are grandfathered, but sometime in the very beginning, they lapsed one time. If you lapse,
The clock started over.
The clock started over.
Yes.
And you're not grandfathered.
So I've seen 20 years.
Yes.
Rhode Island is 25 years and who are 55 at the time of renewal. So there is a duration and age requirement. That's a statute.
Okay. All right. Hey, let's see. I am about to move to another state. If I have completed CEs for my licensing expiring in a month, will I get credit for those with my new resident state?
If you've done your renewal.
If you've done the renewal.
Yes. If you are moving to a new state, I would highly recommend, this is just my advice, go ahead and renew your resident state license, because that's going to be active. And if it takes you 3 or 4 weeks to get moved, then once you submit your letter of clearance to the state, the new state, like if you're moving from Georgia to Texas, Texas is going to go out to Georgia, look at your license status, and they're going to see that your CEs have been met. Your license is active, in good standing, and then they'll issue that letter of clearance. Texas will reactivate activate your new resident license and rock on. If there's any hiccups in that process, if you don't renew your license, then Texas can go in there and see, oh, your license is canceled. You fell out of this little bitty window, and they'll make you take an exam. So it's really a fine line between your license being active, letter of clearance, and your new resident state either issuing you a license or changing your residency from non-resident to resident.
Real quick, back to the exemption question. This came in through the chat. Can you be exempt if you have a certain designation? Rachel, can you answer that from Rhode Island?
Well, that would not work in Rhode Island. There's no CE exemption for a designation, and I'm not sure that that is a thing. I think sometimes the designation waives the licensing exam to get a license, but I don't think it waives any continuing education. But I will say those designations normally require some sort of continuing education to keep them going, and those are typically filed with the states for DE. Sorry for saying.
Yep. Spot on.
So Leslie, I don't know if you caught that. Someone had asked the question, are you exempt if you have a certain designation? They have also listed the designation as TPCE.
Some states do offer an exemption if you hold a certain designation. I just don't know those states off the top of my head, and I now have no power in my house, so I can't access anything.
Oh no! So Leslie, the question is specific to waiving CE.
Not pre-licensing.
Yes,
yes.
there are.
Okay.
There are. I know of at least one state, I'm almost positive, that will waive CE if you hold a certain designation.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
That's my fault, Rachel. I'm sorry. Yes, it was for CE.
Right.
Okay. Sorry, Leslie. I know you're having connection problems. We're going to keep trying.
It's okay.
Do all states roll over any excess hours that you complete to go towards the next renewal cycle requirement? I know the answer to this. Not all states.
No, not all states.
The answer is no.
There is not a cohesive all-state requirement across the board. There's different CE hours that have to be met, different licensing requirements that have to be met. So
Not one uniform thing.
yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's it.
And that's okay, because that's what keeps us in business, right?
Yes.
I'm okay with it. Okay, here's one. I am an adjuster. Will the exam that I take in all, will the exam I take work in all states, or will I have to take an exam to get licensed as a non-resident in any other state? Adjuster. Who's excited to talk about adjuster CEs? Not it.
Well, so that sounds more like initial licensing for adjusters, which
Yeah.
also does not have uniformity or reciprocity like the producer side does.
No.
It's,
Not yet, right, Rachel?
Not yet. But COVID-19 has disturbed my my efforts as the chair of Uniformity Working Group for Education. But we will get back on track in 2021.
No, it depends on reciprocity.
It does.
If you pass your exam, not all states are reciprocal with every other state.
Nope.
That's the problem right now. You might have an exam that's reciprocal with 34 other states or 35, but it's not reciprocal with every single state.
So if you're an adjuster and you have to take multiple exams to be licensed in multiple states, though, how about CE? You have to take multiple CE?
It's possible. Yes.
Rachel, does that have
depends.
anything
it's
to do
very
with
possible.
what we're going to wrap up about today, Rachel?
Yes, I do believe that does have something to do with that. I'm not quite sure we're going to fix everything with the adjuster continuing education requirements. As an adjuster state myself, I don't have any continuing education, so it's that problem's not going to be solved. But I am happy to report that after a lot of poking and prodding, and very fortunate to have again, I've said this a couple of times, Superintendent Dwyer pushing producer licensing issues nationally as the co-chair of producer licensing task force. But some of you may be aware, I know the panelists are aware, that the continuing education reciprocity agreement was refreshed. It was approved at the end of last year. It probably would have gone through the process in March of this year, but there were some issues with COVID-19. But last Friday at the summer national meeting, virtual meeting, the commissioners, the plenary unanimously approved that continuing education reciprocity agreement. And now the NEIC staff is working very hard to get this in front of all the states for signatures. And I know that states are excited about this. I know that Barb is excited about this, and Lesli, and every other continuing education provider. And now it's going to be, really putting everybody to task with getting the signatures, getting people to abide by it, and making sure that all the state systems, I think, are talking to each other.
Are y'all gonna physically go to New York and walk it into the DOI and set it on the superintendent's desk? Because you're probably not gonna get an answer unless you do that.
I have so you have three members.
I volunteer to do it.
That we're in zones, right? So the Northeast zone, where Rhode Island is located, is also New York is part of that. We have our own meetings. We talk about all of these things. So we have a pretty captive audience, and I can say personally, as well as with Superintendent Dwyer, we are very excited about this. I have people emailing me about it, so I think that anything to make it easier, hopefully majority of the states agree with that, will be good. But it did get approved unanimously, so now we just got to take everybody to task, right?
Yes.
Very, very good.
I want to say real quick, we literally have 2 minutes left, and I still had so many questions about CE. We had a lot of great questions coming in about the exams and everything. So I think we need to go ahead and set this for part 2. I know we're out in September before we can do another one, but if you ladies would be willing to come back with us, I would love for us to do a part 2 and finish this discussion. We've still had other questions coming in. I wanted to read one. This is a great question and something we can cover next time. Have they incorporated cybersecurity basics into the insurance exams and into the CE requirements? That is a great question, Lisa. Thank you for submitting that. I'm going to jot that down. That'll be on my list of questions for us to go over next time.
And we'll have an answer for part 2.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have time to prepare for that one. And if anyone out there in the attendee list has any more questions for us, please shoot those to ccquestions@ilsainc.com. That's ILSAINC.com. I'll get those in my list. That's what I ask our panelists, are the questions that you send in to me. So get your questions in, and we'll have plenty to talk about in part 2. Thank y'all so much for coming on with us today.
Before we wrap up, I just want to let all of our attendees know that next week we will be covering everything that is PR, Puerto Rico, in terms of how to get licensed in Puerto Rico as a non-resident or resident agency, and all of the tax benefits that are offered to the insurance community, whether you're an insurance carrier, whether you're an insurance agency, just for the insurance industry specifically, and all of the tax benefits. That's what made us come to Puerto Rico. So stay tuned. That's going to be next Thursday.
Best tax incentive in the world.
Absolutely. And y'all, and Ted and Arleen, be prepared, because I'm going to ask you to tell us the story of your move to Puerto Rico and why you decided to go. And we've got, what, 8 or 9 great panelists coming on for that one next week. That one will be exciting as well.
Our employees' reaction at that time.
Yeah. What? What?
Everyone, have a good rest of the week. Have a great weekend and be safe. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for being here.
Thank you.
Awesome. That was just
Thanks.